Hey guys, what's up? This is Finite MTG, and today I will be bringing you an Innistrad Chaos draft once again. This time, though, I will be going over the draft log and the matches after the fact, and yeah, thought this was a pretty sweet one, so hope you guys will enjoy. Alright, so pack one, pick one here is going to be a good time for me to point out some of the things that I've learned over the course of this format, just kind of my biases after a number of drafts. So we've got some interesting Sultai cards here, like Old Rutstein, which is a pretty interesting one. 3 mana 1/4, which has this kind of cool mill ability. Seems like a decent rate for a card. Kind of an interesting one, if nothing else. There's also a thirst for discovery here. For the most part, this is going to be an upgrade to like compulsive research for limited or thirst for knowledge, things of that nature. So really great card for limited and peasant cube, possibly some higher power level cubes too, depending. And yeah, so these are some pretty powerful options, I think, but I have ended up with some perfectly reasonable Sultai decks in this format, and I just haven't done very well with them. And so I think a big part of that has to do with how many bombs there are in this format and the presence of aggro in this format. It's so much easier to attack than to defend, because just like the aggressive decks are so much more streamlined, they're more consistent, they're capable of killing you really quickly. Removal usually, is a pretty high pick, which means it's hard to slow down the aggressive decks. And then the really bomby cards are very difficult to beat in this format too, also because removal, is a scarcity. So here I actually went with this Distracting Geist, which is a pretty powerful card. 3 mana 2/1 that taps something when it attacks, so less toughness than the Territorial Hammer Skull, but still a really powerful card, and because it disturbs into an aura with that same ability, there's some nice kind of inevitability there if it does end up trading off. Alright, pack one, pick two. So one of the nice things about white in this format is that it pairs well with pretty much every color. You can end up with a really strong white aggressive deck no matter which direction you go. And one such direction that we could go in here is green-white. Green-white is pretty strong. You can have some really nice human synergies in this format. It's one of the more kind of fun things you can do. You can pick up some travel preps. Can really have a bunch of strong options in green-white. It is an allied color pair, and that means there's even more support for it than something like red-white. But here I decided to go with the Tenacity, just thinking like, sure, I would like to play green-white, but this card is a pretty strong combat trick. Lifelink can be really powerful on a mass pump spell. And you know what? I know I want to play white at this point. I don't know whether I want to play green-white specifically. Alright, pack one, pick three. So we do see a card I like quite a bit in this format here in Farbog Explorer. 3 mana 2/3 is fine. The human type can be relevant, as I have pointed out, and as we just saw. And it does have Swamp Walk, so some of the time this is just 3 mana 2/3 unblockable. And it seems like over 50% of the time for me, that's what the card has been. So I do like main decking this card, and then if you find out you're not against someone playing black, then you can maybe board it out. But here we also have a Gold Knight Redeemer. This card is interesting. I don't know if I've ever cast this card outside of this format. And 6 mana 4/4 flying, it's like a decent rate. You'd like maybe another point of power or toughness, but at that point you basically have a bomb. And gaining life is a pretty nice thing to do on your 6-drop. Kind of compensates you for, the first however many turns of the game where it rots in your hand. And yeah, even though white decks are usually aggressive, I think you can afford to play maybe a 6-drop. And though this isn't my favorite, I'd prefer to play a bombier one if possible. It's still a good card, so I think it's a solid pick out of an Avacyn Restored pack. All right, then pack 1, pick 4, our decisions get a little easier here. There is a Rise of the Ants, which is a very good green card, but I really only want to play green if I can pair it with white or with red. And though we could have an interesting green-white deck, we don't really need another 6-mana card. And we are committed to white at this point, and Borrowed Time is an excellent white removal spell. So really happy to pick this one up. Not really sure what these cards are still doing here. 4th pick in, but not going to complain. All right, pack 1, pick 5. Things start to get a little bit tougher for us. We have Geist of the Archives, which is a favorite of mine from my Peasant Cube. Really nice defensive card and does give you some great value over the course of the game. But for our purposes, we're looking at a Dawn Gryph, which is just color-shifted Windrake, if you will, and a Steadfast Cathar. So these cards are both pretty solid. 2-mana 2/1 is not a card you're excited about, but the fact that it's a 2/3 when attacking really makes this a solidly statted card. And Dawn Gryph, the evasion is quite valuable. We're going to be looking for lots of 2s and 3s in a deck like this. But right now we already have a 3-drop. I don't believe we have any 2s. So here we are willing to pick up the Steadfast Cathar over the Dawn Gryph, which might be a slightly stronger card. All right, then pack 1, pick 6. So here we do see kind of a similar choice. We have a nice 2-drop here in Loyal Cathar. Pretty white mana intensive, but also good value. The Vigilance on the front side pretty much guarantees that this will trade off at some point, and that means you get the 2/1 on the backside. So good bit of value there. And then over here, we have Burden of Guilt. So this is a pretty serviceable white removal spell. It does cost you a bunch of mana. You're not going to want too many copies of something like this in your deck. But I think this card gets more hate than it deserves. Sometimes you just need something to lock a creature down, and this can get the job done, and at 1 mana too. Here, though, we decided to go with the Loyal Cathar, just thinking, this deck would like maybe a Burden of Guilt or even 2, but we really need the 2-drops to function, and Cathar is a great one. Note, too, that we passed a Rack with Madness, which is a card I like quite a bit. So pack 1, pick 7 here. We do have a Survive the Night, which is reasonable combat trick, a little mana intensive. But there's also an Expose Evil, and this card has been really very nice for me. Tapping multiple blockers or potential attackers is great, and the fact that the card replaces itself is perfect. So you can be incentivized to play this early on in the game because of that clue that will allow you to cantrip, or you can go for a kill with this card later in the game. So really nice flexibility. This is a card I'm considering for my Peasant Cube, which should speak to how much I am enjoying it. All right, and then pack 1, pick 8. We see a Creeping Renaissance here, which is potentially powerful, but also really slow. You really need, I think, some self-mill to get good value out of it. But we also see a Moment of Heroism here. This is a great combat trick. The lifelink really just makes this a powerful card. Sometimes you'll play this even if you can't kill a creature or your opponent, just so you can get that life swing in. There's also Feeling of Dread, which I am not as excited about as Expose Evil, which we already have, so easy moment for me. Then here, pack 1, pick 9. Still some decent blue cards here late. Also, Snarling Wolf is a card I've liked quite a bit in my aggressive green decks, which is, what I believe should be the only kind of green deck you're playing in this format. There's also a Vampire Slayer here. This card is fine. It's not a very exciting 2-drop. Both of our other 2s are better, but in a pinch, this can be main decked, and it's great out of the sideboard. And pack 1, pick 10 here, we pick up a Double Thorn Fox. Same goes for this card. In a pinch, it can be main decked. This is not really one you're going to be sideboarding in or out too much. Maybe your opponent has Geist Flame or something that really discourages you from playing an X1, but this is just kind of a 2-mana 3/1 beater. All right, pack 1, pick 11. We just take a Cathedral Sanctifier here for fixing, or for signaling. The other cards in the pack are pretty unplayable, so no reason not to take an on-color unplayable. And then pack 1, pick 12 here, we actually see a few reasonable cards. Jack-o'-lantern, something you could play if you're really desperate for fixing. Also a good sideboard card against certain graveyard-intensive strategies. I think Siege Zombie is a pretty good card in this format, even with less of an emphasis on Decayed. And then here we get a Soul Guide Gryff for us. And this 5-drop is pretty nice. The incidental graveyard hate on cards like this really comes in handy in this format. And the body is pretty solid too. Alright, pack 1, pick 13. It's time for me to draft that Geist to the archives. Everybody else disrespected it, and that means that they don't deserve to play with it. Pack 1, pick 14, we get a Ray of Revelation. Probably not going to be able to flash it back, but still a good sideboard card. And pack 1, pick 15, we get a Mountain. Alright, pack 2, pick 1 here. So we get a few interesting options. We see Malignus, which is kind of a silly card. Fettergeist, which is probably a pretty good card for the blue decks, if you can afford to pay the costs for it on your upkeep. We're looking at a Gold Knight Commander, Voice of the Provinces, and a Seraph of the Dawn. So we already have a 6-drop, so that's going to discourage us from playing this thing quite a bit. Gold Knight Commander is a card that looks very powerful, but it's important to remember this card is a 4-mana 2/2, and they can't all be Palace Jailer, so watch out for this card. I think it's a little bit more of a trap than people think. And Seraph of the Dawn, this card is just so simple, so elegant. Never played with it before this format, but this card really does its thing, so that was our pick here. Alright, pack 2, pick 2. Do see some good red and black cards in the pack, but important not to get discouraged. Topplegeist is an interesting option, but Delirium seems not really feasible for us. Inspiring Captain is very much filler, so that leaves us with True Faith Sensor. And this card is a pretty nice equipment. I actually had it in a Chaos draft the other day. It was good for me there too. But it's even better here because we have more humans, and that means you're going to be getting +2/+1 in Vigilance more often. And that's really what you want when you put this card in your deck. Alright, well, time for the wheels to come off a little bit. It's pack 2, pick 3, and we are seeing a Brimstone Volley here somehow in otherwise a pretty lackluster pack of original Innistrad. So, not really sure what's going on here, but it's time for me to reconsider my mono-white aspirations. Think about putting Boros back on the table. Alright, pack 2, pick 4. Really not too much to say about this pick. Borrowed Hostility is not going to be a pull for me into red. Thraben Standard Bearer is a horrible card. And Borrowed Grace is a pretty serviceable mass pump effect. So this is a card, it can be a little expensive, but happy enough to take it. We already have that Tenacity, but in a pinch we could play both. Okay, and then pack 2, pick 5 here. We get another Burden of Guilt, and remember, I still would like to pick up one of these, but we also see a Niblis of the Mist. And this card is quite interesting. We're a little low on 3-drops at the moment. We do have a bunch of mediocre 2s. And this card is actually really nice in this deck because that tap ability is more relevant for us than it usually is. Our deck is really about getting through damage, getting some good tempo, and a 3-drop that not only has evasion and 2 power, but also allows us to maybe get in some chip damage the turn we play it. It's going to be a really nice pickup for us. Better, I thought, than the Burden of Guilt. In pack 2, pick 6 here, we see a Sigardian Paladin, which is a nice green card, which we could be interested in if we had tried to go that Selesnya Humans route. Instead, though, there's just a Heron of Hope for us, and this card is going to be a nice 4-drop that's able to make our deck virtually no matter what, unlike maybe the Brimstone Volley or the Paladin over there. So the Heron is pretty good one for us. And then here, pack 2, pick 7, we see a Thraben Exorcism, which is a strictly better version of Urgent Exorcism. It's always fun to see these kind of upgrades in this Innistrad Chaos format. But we also have Celestis Sanctifier. This card reminds me so much of the 2 and a white 3/2 that has lifelink if you have Coven. But this card is different. It's actually much better. Because the lifelink on a 3/2 is not necessarily the most relevant thing. It really takes a while to turn that on, and at that point a 3/2 might not be able to attack. Whereas this card, by the time the 3/2 mode isn't doing as much for you, it still is able to maybe accomplish something pretty interesting. It doesn't quite surveil, because it does force you to put one of the cards into your graveyard and keep the other on top. But this card can be a pretty nice way of kind of filtering your draw steps, which is not something white has often. So I do like this card a decent amount. Alright, pack 2, pick 8 here. We have a Curse Break. Remember, I think we already have the Ray of Revelation, so we don't really need another copy of this effect. So this time I just picked up Commander's Authority. Not something I'm anticipating playing, but maybe if I'm in a grindy enough situation, it's going to be interesting. Alright, pack 2, pick 9. We have a very strong red card still in the pack in Lightning Mauler. Could be a good one for us if we had gone more that Boros route. Could have taken the Stone Right if we were going to do that too, and then, you know, maybe we get a strong deck, but we definitely compromise the consistency of our mana, right? So the Voice of the Province is Wheels, and this is a card we could play. There's also Call to Serve. Flying Auras can be potentially good ways of chasing people out, but enough of our cards already have flying that I'm not really interested in this, and +1/+2 is not super strong. So I'm interested more so in this Zealous Strike. Pumps toughness, which is not something you see super often on these first strike combat tricks. And I think the card is just pretty solid. It's another cheap effect, and that's kind of what we're looking for. Alright, pack 2, pick 10 here. We get a Morkrut Necropod. This is another kind of underrated finisher for the black decks that I think people get kind of caught up in the drawback when in fact, 6 mana, 7/7 Menace is going to need something a little bit more negatively impactful than making you sack some like unimpactful creatures or lands to really punish you for playing it. Alright, then pack 2, pick 11 here. Some very unexciting cards. I think I took the Feral Ridge Wolf, which is not a card I really ever try to play, but more playable than the rest. Here we get a Markov Crusader. These lifelinkers can be pretty annoying, and especially this one with haste can really put a damper on your day. Pack 2, pick 13, we pick up a Heckling Fiends. The ability can accomplish something that's going to be a little more interesting than something like Curse of the Nightly Hunt, and the Russet Wolves, not too much going for it. In pack 2, pick 14, we get a really interesting one here. There's still a Lacerate Flesh, and although this card is not the cheapest, most efficient red removal spell, we do have that Brimstone Volley. We could put red on the table if we are able to pick up some Fixing, maybe some Evolving Wilds. I think that card is in this format a few times over. And we are a little bit low on removal, so just kind of a weird choice there to pick up such a playable card so late. And pack 2, pick 15, we get a Swamp. Alright, well, I just mentioned not having very much removal, and pack 3, pick 1, we do not take a Divine Reckoning, because this card is very bad. Does not accomplish what you want it to, because your opponent's always going to keep their best creature. So instead we take a Bonds of Faith, which is a nice efficient removal spell that doubles as an aggressive aura. And I've started playing this card a little more often for that aggressive aura side. In the past, if I didn't see any targets on my opponent's side of the battlefield that weren't humans, that is, then I would just be a little conservative, keep this in hand. But with the aggressive decks, you really do want to run this thing out and just try to get some damage in. And if you get 2 for 1, so be it. Trying to win the game is just more important than worrying about that kind of thing. Alright, pack 3, pick 2. So in this pack, we do see some other interesting cards like Abandoned Reason, Imprisoned in the Moon. Neither one of these cards is amazing in my opinion. They're both a little awkward and clunky. But we do find a Lone Rider here. This is a card I think other people like more than I do. It's a really nice aspirational design. I believe the backside, which you don't get to see here, is a 4/4 trample, first strike, lifelink. No vigilance. And trample on a white card is a little bit funny, but this card is pretty powerful, and we actually have a number of ways of gaining life. So I think that this is something we might be able to achieve, and if nothing else, it's a threatening card for our opponents to potentially spend a removal spell on. Alright, pack 3, pick 3 here. We see more cards from Avacyn Restored that we have already seen. We see another Gold Knight Redeemer, another Voice of the Provinces. This time we see Angelic Armaments. So in addition to these angels that we've already seen, we see something that makes something an angel. This card is going to be, I think, good in very, very slow formats, so not this one. Or matchups, depending. But we do have a second Seraph of Dawn here, and this card is just super efficient, like I already said, and of course we're more willing to play, another 4-drop than another 6. Alright, and then here, pack 3, pick 4. I believe, I don't remember what I took here. Okay, so here I think we ended up going with that Midnight Guard. 3 mana, 2/3 Pseudo Vigilance. It's going to be better some of the time than like a Farbog Explorer. There's also a Break of Day in the pack, but we already have multiple mass pumps that I think are better than this, so not really that into this card. Grafdigger's Cage could be an interesting sideboard option, but we're not really interested in that either. Alright, pack 3, pick 5. So here we see an Apothecary Geist, which is not a card I like very much, and although we have a few spirits, we don't have a ton. That said, we did just pick up the Lone Rider, and this is a way of gaining 3 life. So this is a card we could consider if we are maybe a little low on playables or just looking for some extra life gain. Alright, pack 3, pick 6. I said I didn't want another 6-drop, but here we are anyway. Subjugator Angel, 6 mana, 4/3 flyer that locks everything down when you play it. So this card is quite nice. Really can help you crack in for lethal damage. And, yes, it is a 6-drop, but this is a 6-drop that really rewards you for waiting to be able to cast it. You just develop your board up to playing this. If you get into a stall, then great. Just cast it if you can kill your opponent, or even if you can't, you get a 4/3 flying body. So pretty nice one there for us. Would be a great card. Amazing at 5 mana. Okay. Pack 3, pick 7. We do see some pretty strong cards here. Unfortunately, they are not in our colors. So we see 3 strong green cards here. Apprentice Sharpshooter, Hookhand Mariner, Rural Recruit. All these cards I like a good amount. So we're going to take what I think is the better of the 2 red cards in the pack, the Alluring Suitor. Try to deprive red players of good picks from this pack. And then here we see a Cathar's Call, which is already pretty similar to another 5 mana aura that we have that we're not interested in. And we do see a Sun Gold Barrage here, which is a pretty nice white interactive card. It's not a card I want to main deck, but sometimes you'll be in spots where you kind of need to make playables. And it is a pretty good rate on this thing. Instant speed 2 is nice, so the Barrage is a nice pickup for us. And here we see a pretty good red card still in this pack somehow. I get Kessig Wolf. The Crossway Vampire is a little difficult to cast for me. And this thing, the front half is just a little too dorky. So happy enough with a Kessig Wolf. And then here, I believe we picked up an Abandoned Reason. So again, just seeing these pretty reasonable red cards going kind of late here, wondering if we're supposed to be in Boros rather than mono white. Still kind of leaning mono white at the moment, but we'll see how things end up. Oh, we pick up another red card here in the Fervent Cathar. So there is definitely a red way to build this deck. We've just picked up too many red cards for it not to be on the table. This time though, pack 3, pick 12, we're going to pass what I consider to be the better of the red cards, the Erdwall Ripper, for Fling, which is not a card I love, but I think it's a card that can do some work, and it's just much easier to cast in a deck where you're not very heavy red. So that was really behind my decision there. Okay, pack 3, pick 13. 3 mana 4/1 without any synergies or ways to get this to hit. I guess we can tap down some blockers and then it becomes kind of interesting. But for the most part, this card is not super exciting, and Spiteful Motives can be a really strong trick. The ability to play a combat trick that kills something and then sticks around effectively works like card advantage. So cards like this can be really nice, especially if your opponent doesn't have mana up when you cast them. In pack 3, pick 14, we get a Crop Sigil, card I'm interested in for my 1 mana cube that I'm working on. And we get a Mountain here last pick. Alright, so this is how I ended up building the deck. As you can see, I pretty much just played all of my white cards that I consider relatively playable. Left some sideboard cards where they belong, in my opinion, and did play 2 6-drops here with only 16 planes, but this is not the kind of deck where you want to play 17 lands. One of the advantages of playing monocolor is that your color requirements are much more consistent, and that is a big part of the reason for getting to 17 or maybe even 18 lands with some decks. So here I was pretty happy with 16 lands, and we do have a pretty good curve despite these multiple 6-drops. Alright, now on to some matches. So we're able to play first here in round 1, game 1. And we have a pretty good hand. We have multiple castable spells on 2 mana, and if we find a couple more lands, we can cast a couple more spells. So this is going to be good enough for me. Opponent also has planes to start, and we get to play our Fox here. Opponent does not have any kind of follow-up here, so we are happy to crack in for 3 damage and just pass the turn. They could have had some like 2 damage to an attacker or blocker thing that our Moment of Heroism could have sort of countered, but don't have to worry about that. We're going to attack for another 3 here with our Devilthorn Fox. Opponent decides not to block. I think they actually are supposed to, even though it's quite likely that I am holding a combat trick, because the 2 mana 3/1s do hit really hard, even though I've missed a land drop here and they probably have a human next turn. I think you just want to try to force the matter instead of kind of taking damage for no reason. But this time we're able to play a Celestis Sanctifier, which is pretty nice. Opponent has main deck Ghost Quarter, which is not something you should do, I think. And they have a Search Party Captain, so it's a nice human for their Elder Cathara to try to put a couple counters on. So here, I believe, I just go for this Distracting Geist. And this card shines in spots like this, really acts as a 2-for-1, where it's a card that removes blockers and attacks for damage. So once again, cards like this are so strong and limited. Opponent just passes the turn here, which is going to flip our Sanctifier, if you will. And I don't remember what I did here. I think I got rid of the planes kind of greedily. Actually, no, I probably got rid of the Lone Rider here, huh? Even though we do have the Spirit to gain 3 life, we have the Distracting Geist plus Apothecary Geist to flip the Lone Rider, or just the Moment. So yeah, I did take the land, just kind of thinking the only way I lose is through Mana Screw. Pretty conservative, but potentially correct. And then here I get to tap down the Elder Cathar. Opponent has to figure out a block. I don't remember whether I went for this Moment of Heroism. I think there's a decent chance that I didn't. Just planning on casting the Apothecary Geist because the opponent does have so much mana up. Yep, and then go for a Zealous Strike, so definitely rewarding me for not playing my Moment of Heroism. That would have gone very poorly. And so here, they just take the damage, trades off, and then now I get to play that Apothecary Geist. Opponent has a Gavany Unhallowed, which is a card that I think is pretty powerful. I think I've been underrating it a decent amount. Here I think I go for a block that I may or may not have needed to make. It's a very free attack. It seems like they're just trying to grow their Unhallowed. They could have another combat trick, and if so, I'm fine getting that out of the way too. But with them at 8 life, it's probably just fine to take the damage and try to kill them with the flyer. So they have an Adamant Will this time, which is going to flip my Sanctifier back. This time I believe we get rid of the Vampire Slayer in favor of the Plains. Yep, and now just go for that Soul Guide Griff, which still is going to represent a lethal threat here in 2 turns, attacking for 3 damage on its own and then 5 damage with that Moment of Heroism. Though the opponent cracks a Blood to go up to 9 life, attacks for 2. This time we're going to take it. We don't want to pop their Cathar and grow 2 of their creatures. So this time we attack with Soul Guide Griff and we play the Seraph here. And we are setting up for lethal next turn with a Moment of Heroism, and the opponent just scoops. Alright, and back here for game number 2 of round 1, we have a very reasonable hand. Bonds of Faith probably not doing a ton against this opponent, but still a good enough card, I think. We get to play a Steadfast Cathar on turn 2. Opponent has a very powerful one here in the Gavany Dawnguard. And I believe at this point I just go for the Bonds of Faith on my own human. It's not really doing too much else. I want to be able to cast a spell so their Dawnguard doesn't flip. That would be really annoying for me. So we get to start getting in some damage here. Looks like the opponent's going to attack for 3. And they play a Bat Whisperer, which is a reasonable one. They have the ability to double block and trade for the Steadfast Cathar if they would like to. And then here I go for the Borrowed Time on that Dawnguard. Don't want the opponent to be able to draw any cards, and then I just pass the turn because I don't want to trade my Cathar. Opponent attacks for 4, which is somewhat interesting, possibly correct. But now they don't really have a good block on my Cathar after playing their own. So now we just attack for 4, opponent chumps with the Bat. So again, just kind of a strange play there from them. And then here I believe we go for the Seraph. Oh no. Yeah, actually this time I think I wanted to go for the Geist because either creature can profitably block the Cathar and trade for the Whisperer, and I just want to play my worse creature here and trade for the Whisperer. Opponent has Undying Malice, which could have been annoying on the Whisperer if maybe they had attacked with both creatures or something. I'm not really sure. And then they play a Silver Claw Griffin. Pretty good 5-drop. So we attack once again for 4, and then I think here we go for the Soul Guide Griff. Just need to spend the mana efficiently. Yeah. And profitable blocks on their smaller creatures, but I think here we do have to trade for their 5/3. Yep. This time the trade does work out, which is pretty nice for us. Opponent chumps with their Elder Cathar, so just kind of more interesting plays for them. Some chumps for no reason. We get to play Gold Knight Redeemer, gain some life, establish a nice flyer. And we still have good attacks here. I don't know if there's a reason for me to play around something. I guess they could have instant speed removal, but I don't play around anything here, attacking with both. They go for the obvious block, and I think I go for the Moment here. Yep. Yep, and then now I play my Seraph, finally, and the opponent goes for Reaper of Night Moonsilver, or Flight Moonsilver, excuse me, and they just discard something to make a 1/1. And I think at this point they are just really never winning this game. They chomp, and we have lethal with Zealous Strike. Alright. Okay, so this is a really, really exciting match. This is main reason I wanted to bring you guys this draft. And it's going to prove my point about some of the bombs in this format. So we're going to play first. And we mull a 0-lander, and I think we're keeping this 5-lander, getting rid of a land. And things are looking pretty rough for us. We find another land, which, you know, we already didn't want 5 lands. We got rid of one. Now we find another land, so really just way more than we would need or want. Opponent has a Geist Flame, so already looking like a much worse matchup than the last one. And they have a Dark Thicket Wolf missing a land drop. So here we draw Lone Rider, and we actually have the ability to flip it next turn, because the Heron of Hope, although it has 2 power, it can gain 3 life because of its ability. And that means that the Lone Rider will be able to transform. So that's actually a pretty great draw from us. Nice way to come back in this game. Opponent has a Borderland Ranger and a Black-Red duel. So interesting that they just go Forest Borderland Ranger pre-combat like that. They actually missed 2 points of damage with their Dark Thicket Wolf. And then here I get to make the play I was describing. We get our nice 4/4 into play, and the opponent plays an Arlen Chord, making a 2/2. So now they have a few 2/2s. Things are looking pretty rough. We do find a Bonds of Faith here. Important to remember that this time we cannot put it on one of our own creatures beneficially. We really need to kill this Arlen Chord, or bad things are going to happen. And unfortunately, you know, we don't have a clear-cut way of doing that. Even if we remove a blocker, they can still keep the Arlen Chord alive. And we have multiple ways of removing a blocker, since we do have the aura here in the graveyard, the Distracting Geist. I think my play was still Bonds of Faith on the Dark Thicket, attack both at the Arlen, and then give lifelink and play the Loyal Cathar. Nice mana efficient turn, and even though we don't kill the Arlen, you know, we get these 2/2s are basically chump blocking because my creature has first strike. So it seems like we're in great shape here. We're at 31 life. We are hellbent, and the opponent has 6 cards though, so that could be relevant maybe. They go for the Lightning Bolt on the flipped Lone Rider, presumably flashing back Geist Flame. But no, it's a bit worse for me. They have, I believe, Savage Alliance to kill 2 of my creatures here. So that's rough for me. I'm left with a 2/2. But the good news is, you know, I'm still at 31 life. They're at 18. I'm ahead on board. I top deck a 2/2, which is not looking like it really has text versus them, but maybe. And the plot thickens here as the opponent just continues, you know, showing me all these basics of different colors. So this time we draw yet another Plains that we're not really interested in. I believe we go for the Distracting Geist on the Loyal Cathar. Yep. Because they're incentivized to kill it, but also discouraged from killing it. So get a nice attack for 4 in here. Opponent goes to 12. And they have a Lingering Souls, which sort of explains what they're doing. Arlen Chord Lingering Souls deck. Borderland Ranger. Maybe it makes sense. I'm not too sure. And here I think we just have to go for the attack with both. First I was really reluctant to attack, and then I realized that 1, things aren't really getting better for us, and 2, they can't trade off with both of our creatures because we do tap one of their blockers, so that's something. But they do trade for the front half of the Cathar, which means we get rid of the tapping aura. But we do play the Sanctifier, which hopefully will find us some action here. The opponent has a Ghoul Steed, so not the scariest 4/4s they could have, but, you know, still going to beat us down at some point. And then we find a Steadfast Cathar here. And then I believe I just pass the turn here without casting it, so I can flip my Sanctifier. Yeah. And then we find Niblis of the Mist here, binning that Midnight Guard. And the Niblis could enable us to have some kind of interesting attack. They go for the Make 2 Blood, Drain for 2 card, which is a very, very strange one for their deck. I don't think it really fits. We just take 8 here. And then, yeah, we do draw this Niblis. Now, I believe we just go for the attack with all. So we Niblis, tap a Spirit, attack with all of our creatures, play the Cathar. It's going to flip the Sanctifier back. Opponent chumps the Sanctifier rather than trading for the 2/1, which is another interesting choice by them. This time we play the Steadfast Cathar, and as you might be able to tell how many X1s we have versus their Geist Flame, which is still in their graveyard, and their Savage Alliance, you know, kind of see how rough this matchup is. So unfortunately we're not flipping that Sanctifier after all, because they do just finish it off there. They have a Ghoul Flesh 2, another X1 hate card. This one, though, I don't really consider playable, so very interesting that they have it in their deck that is already very strong against X1s. I think maybe they were a little low on playables from all their nonsense in other colors. So at this point, we have an interesting decision to make. We need to be able to block at least one of their 4/4s. So I think, I mean, the Cathar has to, the unhallowed Cathar specifically, because there's always more than one Cathar on the board in this format. Yeah, I guess I just go for the attack all here, even though I'm dead on board if they don't block. I think I was just counting on them blocking. And they do block and trade. So now I play my Apothecary Geist. And yeah, I think that was the correct play, but it's definitely a bit of a risk. Opponent cracks their Terrarion. And they play a Tavern Ruffian, which unfortunately makes it look like I will be dying here. They attack for another 8. This time we do have to block. Not too many cards that get us out of a spot like this. But we do find one of them. So we find the Subjugator Angel off the top, which is going to take it down here against the Tavern Ruffian as we crack in for the final 4 damage. Oh, and the opponent, I forgot, they have an Anguished Unmaking. So they are able to answer one of our attackers, but of course they still go to the Perilous, Precarious 1 life, and that will kill them. Alright, so we know the opponent's deck is pretty wild, very greedy, but also some very strong cards, as we have a mulligan here once again in game 2. This time we are able to keep, I think I get rid of a Plains here in favor of that Subjugator, because we just need as much action as we can get. The Expose Evil cycles. Opponent leads on Forest, Swamp. You never know what their basics are representing here. We have a Steadfast Cathar and they miss a land drop, so it's starting to feel like we're in business. I think here I play Distracting Geist. Yep, and any blocker is not going to do too much from them. But they have this card, and this card is really, really messed up. Basically means that I cannot play this Niblis anymore, because they can just kill it for free. If they find red mana, then they can just start fighting all my creatures. And I can't Bonds of Faith it, so I mean, this card is just single-handedly a disaster for me. I think here I go for the Bonds of Faith on the Steadfast Cathar to try to get some damage through and prevent this thing from flipping, because if they do find a mountain, this flipping could be really horrible for me. So yeah, we do go for the attack for 6 here, and it's kind of unclear who's winning, but they do have this boon of Emrakul, which is horrible for me, once again. I think they go for an attack for 2 here correctly. Yeah, so we play this Distracting Geist. I think we're still not playing the Niblis here, because, I mean, this is just like a Zugzwang, right? Like, if we play the Niblis, their dude doesn't flip and they can kill it for free, but if we play nothing, then maybe their creature can flip and start fighting all of our creatures. So we're just in really a horrible spot no matter what if they find the red mana. Does flip here, and they do go for the red mana, but fortunately for us, it's red mana that we can respond to. So knowing that they have it here is going to be reason enough for me to expose evil. So we do that, tap their dude. So this is one of the many uses of expose evil that is just so nice. It's a really versatile card because you're able to recoup the card you spent on it. We find a Moment of Heroism, which unfortunately is not looking like it'll be able to kill them. I think here we go for the Distracting Geist. Oh, they go for a Geist Flame, and then I choose to use the Moment of Heroism here to just get through some chip damage, but also, you know, now they're going to have to flash the Geist Flame back to kill the Geist if they want to do it that way, and maybe that means the Niblis gets to survive a little bit. So they go to 6. We may have boarded in the Sun Gold Barrage against this player too, I don't remember. So yeah, they just fight main phase here, which is pretty rough for me. Pass the turn. The Celestis is going to flip. And now, yeah, I think we just go for the Subjugator here. So still going to be quite the battle versus their 4/4, but they have a Plummet, which is horrible for me. Opponent has another Celestis flip here, and it's really funny that the Celestis transforming doesn't change the old werewolves, but it does change the new ones. And then they just attack for 4, play 1/3. We finally pick up this Sun Gold Barrage that we boarded in against them to blow up, their bomb. But we don't want to play the Niblis because we know they have the Geist Flame. So we're actually going to wait for a land here so we can Tenacity to save the Niblis, and maybe that'll get something going here. So they get yet another point of life gain and another... Is it a loot or a rummage? I think it's a loot. Yeah, this card's so good. And I think I even lose a life from it? No, they just gain a life, okay. And then, so I play Niblis here. They go for the Geist Flame, I believe, here, end of turn. And I, of course, have to Tenacity. So Geist Flame is just still a huge beating versus my deck. And now, I don't remember what they have, but they have something here as always. Maybe it's a... yes. Yep, so they have the Dread Feast Demon here, which is just such a horrible card. Why does this exist? One copy of this is already difficult enough to beat. Why do they have to make additional ones? Just a really miserable design. Opponent attacks for their 1 point of damage, and, nothing we can do at this point. I don't think there's a single draw in the deck that gets us out of this position. We're dying very, very quickly. So, on to game 3. So, here we are for game 3. We are on the play, which is really good for our deck, of course. Feeling optimistic. This is the first game against this opponent. I didn't have to mull an opening hand. And, our mana base should be much more consistent than theirs. We should be able to have a relatively easy game here if we just find some additional creatures, and we do. We find Distracting Geist once again, so everything's looking great. Opponent has 2 mana, 1/3. So this is a totally free attack with our Loyal Cathar, and they do correctly choose to block, but we could be using a combat trick later to get through that Flamebreaker. In the meantime, we're playing this Distracting Geist, and they cast the Celestis. And it's important to note that they do already have 3 of their colors of mana, but they're missing green. And green really unlocks some powerful cards for them, like Arlen Cord and the Daybreak Ranger. So here I just decide to make a play that normally I would consider very loose, but against this opponent I think it's correct. So we go for the attack here, and then I borrowed time on their Celestis, thinking, this keeps them off of green mana, keeps them off of double-colored mana that they need, and it sets them back. We already have Expose Evil to tap additional blockers, and Tenacity as a trick. If we find a land, we have the Soul Guide Gryph. So it seems like we're in great shape, and they top deck the Forest. As expected, into the Arlen Cord, and suddenly now this is an enormous punish for the borrowed time play, even though it seemed so reasonable. They just can't really have that many forests in their deck, right? They're playing a 4-color deck. And so here, I believe I just needed to use that Expose Evil to kill the Arlen Cord. The Geist only taps 1 blocker. We need to get through 1 more. So yeah, we do tap both here. And once again, pretty good use of the tap effect, just because it cantrips. And they do have the Geist Flame once again to kill the Distracting Geist the first time. They attack with the Wolf. And I don't think we're blocking here. Yeah. And they go for a Rite of Oblivion. So this is a horrible card for me. Really good from them that they did not show me in the previous games, as it's a powerful flashback spell, and some of my cards that do have some incremental graveyard value, like this Cathar, well, it's just going to be a rough one for me. But they don't even get rid of the Cathar, they get rid of the Borrowed Time, which gets their Celestis back, which at least makes me think that I was correct in removing the Celestis at the time. And then here, fortunately, we are able to go for the Soul Guide Gryph, exiling that Geist Flame, which is a very annoying one versus us. Or, oops, actually we're exiling the Rite of Oblivion now, the flashback spell that they just showed us, which could otherwise answer the Gryph. And we're hoping, maybe the Gryph is able to attack enough times that we're able to kill them. They get to Madness here, a Bloodhall Priest. So the rares just keep on coming from the opponent. Really crazy stuff. Thank goodness they are not Hellbent here, because it would just be a disaster otherwise. We get to attack for 3 here in the air, and we're holding up this Tenacity, which, at some point could be relevant. And we actually have this part of the Vampire Slayer be relevant this time against the Bloodhall Priest. So the opponent taps a bunch of mana for a Tavern Ruffian, which enters as a 6/5, which is just a really potent threat. But they do flip it back generously here to a 2/5. Still easily seems correct for them. They're not attacking with it this turn, so it's not like they're missing out on any damage or anything. They're probably just going to activate the Celestis every turn from now on anyway. So, and then here, I think this is a Spirit, right? Yeah, it is. So we get to play the Apothecary Geist, gaining a few life here and attacking for 3. So that's something. And I believe we still have the blocker tapper in the graveyard. Yeah, the Distracting Geist. Opponent just keeps using that Celestis. They flip their dude into a 6/5. And if they're able to get Hellbent here, then the Bloodhall Priest can get rid of this Vampire Slayer, and then we have to double block this thing. They kill the Geist, and then we're taking 6 minimally. So things are really horrible for me here if they get Hellbent. And they have a Savage Alliance. So it looks like they're killing my Apothecary Geist. So much for that double block on the Bloodhall Priest. This is just a total disaster for me. Their creatures have trample. And that means now, I'm just absolutely getting rocked here. They kill my Vampire Slayer, and I just take 10 damage. And so now we're in a strange spot. We find this Gold Knight Redeemer, which is a nice one to cast, but we also want a Tenacity and gain some life. So I think here we go for the attack with both. And we don't Tenacity, even though, that would kill this and gain us 7 life, right? Instead, we're going to gain 4 life, play this Gold Knight Redeemer, which does have the ability to trade with the Bloodhall Priest, or if they can't get Hellbent for some reason, maybe we can double block the Smasher. And they have the Dreadfeast Demon once again. And yeah, the card is still miserable. Nothing's changed there. The Loyal Cathar gets hit, and we have to trade for their 4/4 rare. And yeah, we are just absolutely getting annihilated here. Even though we were on the play, we removed their green source. They just top decked their way into Arlen Cord, and then just cast a bunch of rares. And now here I guess we Niblis here pre-combat. It doesn't really matter. We tap something. We attack with both. Opponent doesn't block, which I don't know why you wouldn't block, but they didn't. So now I just Tenacity to untap my attackers and gain a bunch of life, but we're just mega dead here. Celestis flips again. And I believe, yeah, now they have the Geist Flame to kill the Niblis, and then we actually just die. So yeah, really, really rough one versus this 4-color deck. I thought my deck was really consistent, but just sometimes you can't compete with the bombs like this. But if nothing else, I think it was a really, really interesting match. It seemed like we were kind of in it the whole time. And I think that says a lot, considering the difference in the quality of cards played. All right, here we are back for round number 3. Disappointed with the loss, of course, hoping to end up with a 2-1 with this strong mono white deck, and we get a nice keepable hand here. Vampire Slayer is not a card that's really impressed me, but, better having a 2-drop than not having a 2-drop. So here we have the Niblis to get in a couple points of damage, which is pretty much what the card is supposed to do, so that's nice. And then here, I think we just go for the Seraph and don't attack with anything, but there's also a chance I put the Bonds of Faith on the Vampire Slayer and Zealous Strike the Niblis. Yeah, no, it looks like we're going to be a little more conservative than that. Opponent uses the Selhoff, which, I don't think the card's very good, and I also don't think you're really supposed to activate it. But they have a Makeshift Mauler here, which makes them look, pretty smart for doing that. Though there's a chance maybe they should have done that last turn. And so here, I believe I just go for the Bonds of Faith on that, and then I attack with everything. I get to Zealous Strike whatever the Scrap Skin blocks. And of course they block the 2-1. So we have a nice swing here. Good use of mana. The opponent has a bounce spell, which now can exile their Scrap Skin Drake that I just killed. But I'm attacking for 4 in the air here. This time we have a Soul Guide Gryph to exile their graveyard, though it seems like it's a little late for that to be relevant. Opponent has a Tandem Lookout, which is a very powerful card that could get them back into the game. Decided at this point I'm not going to get through for any damage on the ground, really, so I just throw the Vampire Slayer here in front, I believe. Or actually, no, this time I don't. I think I'm thinking about using the Tenacity here. I have, not too much other action, so it seems like it makes sense. And they do have a Candle Trap. So here, yeah, I just go for this attack all. They block the 1-3 onto our 2-2, and that's more than enough for me to use this Tenacity here, which, untaps our attackers. It's going to kill their creature and give us a nice life cushion all the way up to 29 here. And yeah, I believe last turn they played the Candle Trap post-combat on the Soul Guide Gryph, discouraging us from using it to block the 4-5, which makes a lot of sense. But this time we do. Oh, okay. This time I guess we forget to to do that. But obviously that's what we should have done here. I think I figured out next turn, which is not ideal, but better late than never. And then here I just play another Seraph of the Dawn. This time we are going to use the Soul Guide Gryph appropriately. And effectively nothing's changed here. Both creatures, died. They were going to die anyway, just in the opposite order. We denied them a card each time. So here we go for the lethal attack, and even if they have something, it's not too bad for me. They try to eat the 2-1, but they take lethal damage in the process. So we end up getting their game 1 versus them, and our life total is quite high as well. All right. Game 2, unfortunately, we mulligan, but I decide I'm willing to keep a 1-lander on the draw. Unfortunately, the draw step here is Seraph of the Dawn. I kept this 1-lander because we have a ton of action if we find just one more planes. But unfortunately, it's not looking like that's how things are going to go here for us as we continue to find spells. At least the opponent isn't casting anything, but we are discarding hand size here. Yeah, I think we get rid of the Heron of Hope, and we find another Seraph. So really just seeing kind of the worst cards off the top of our library. Opponent plays a Silver Claw Griffin. We eventually find the planes for the 3-1, which threatens to attack for a lot of damage if nothing else. Opponent is able to attack us for 4 here, and they play Scrapskin Drake. We attack with our Fox, really hoping to use that moment of heroism, get back into the game a little bit, but unfortunately it doesn't work out for us. We play the Vampire Slayer instead. We do try to trade the Slayer for their 2/2, and it does end up working out here. And they have a 3/6, which is pretty horrible for me. Fortunately, we do have that Bonds of Faith, but we're still just continuing to miss these lands. We're not doing well in this race. The opponent just has too much stuff going on here. We find the plains, and yeah, attack with this Fox, which can't block any other stuff anyway. I think, yeah, we play this Distracting Geist, trying to trade it for the Uninvited Guest, but they have a bounce spell, and that just seals the game here. So on to game number 3. Hopefully we won't miss as many lands. Alright, so here we are for game number 3. This hand is pretty strange. No 2-drops, and we only have the Sanctifier in terms of creatures, but we do have a bunch of castable spells, and that's going to be reason enough for me to keep. Get to lead on a Loyal Cathar off the top, which is a great feeling here. And then we play the Sanctifier, just developing the board versus their bounce spell. Kind of a strange use of that one. They could easily have a counter spell here, but I think I play the Seraph into it anyway because I don't care, and it does resolve this time. But they do have a Valorous Stance to kill it, which is unfortunate for me. Passing the turn once again, just going to run out that Sanctifier like we did before. Opponent has a Soul Caesar, so this is a pretty powerful creature that effectively is able to do a mind control impression here. So we go for the attack with both, and then I think I needed to use the Expose Evil at their beginning of combat step here to prevent them from stealing one of my creatures. Yeah, I did. So once again, Expose Evil just doing tons and tons of work. Silverclaw Griffin coming down from them, which is not a huge deal. We get to crack this clue, and then our moment will allow us to attack into the Griffin. Do attack with both. They block the bigger one. Go for the moment. It does work out, fortunately, and we get to play this Distracting Geist. And we get to put a Borrowed Time on top of our library, which is great versus this Mind Control. They have a Tandem Lookout here, so they do get to draw a card. And they choose to steal my 2/1, which is untapped, which makes sense, I think. And I think their Tandem Lookout is not paired anymore. Oh, and then they have the sick play kind of sacking it to the Wretched Griff. I actually think this plays kind of bad. I think you're supposed to take the 3/2, which doesn't have any value in the graveyard if you're going to make this play. On the other hand, this prevents me from being able to tap down a blocker right away. So I don't know, there's an argument either way. It's also possible they stacked their triggers incorrectly and didn't have the option available to them. So we get rid of that, and we get to attack with both here. The Vigilance of Loyal Cathar doing a ton of work here. Opponent falls to 5. And they have a Stitched Drake and just a Guardian of Pilgrims. We find a land, which is great. Casts our Subjugator Angel. It's going to allow us to get in for a couple damage here. Opponent just passes the turn. We're going to cast a Gold Knight Redeemer. We're doing this pre-combat and not attacking because the Subjugator would trade off with the Stitched Drake, and with a couple cards in hand and with them having mana available, no reason to really go for anything crazy at this point. So they have a Choking Restraints on the Gold Knight, which is annoying. I think I just keep developing the board here. No, it looks like this time we're going for lethal. So I play the Clever Distraction on the Subjugator, which should be able to tap down the Stitched Drake and hopefully kill the opponent. But I actually do mess up here fairly significantly, so I go for an attack with the Subjugator, which makes sense because that'll kill them, but the Loyal Cathar has a free attack too, right? Like, I'm happy to trade with their Guardian of Pilgrims, and then I get my 2/1 back, and we know their 3/4 is going to be tapped here, so there's just really no reason for me to miss this attack. And they have a Blessed Alliance, which is just a pretty enormous punish, because I would have been able to sack my Loyal Cathar. And that means, you know, the Angel would still be alive, they'd be under more pressure from it next turn, and the 4 life they would gain would keep them alive, but it just worked out so much worse. The They can't even do anything super tricky where like they block the Guardian and Pilgrims onto the Loyal Cathar, let damage happen, then play the Blessed Alliance, because like during the end of combat while my 4-3 is still technically attacking, because they would have died at that point. They needed to gain the life first. So really pretty frustrating punish for slightly loose play. And the opponent has a Geist Snatch, which is also very rough on another flyer of mine. Seems like they're clawing back into this game. They have a Vessel of Paramnesia and a Gale Drifter. Attack for 1. And we have a Borrowed Time on the Choking Restraints, which unlocks our 4/4 flyer. And yeah, not able to go for the attack all at this point, but at some point we are hoping to do that with the Tenacity in the back. And we can even use the Tenacity to untap the burdened creature, but we have to do it at a point where they can't or don't remember to just tap it down again. So we have Seraph of the Dawn here, which is a great top deck because it stops them from attacking. And we have a Devil Thorn Fox off the top of the library as well. And they have a Makeshift Mauler now. And we have a Niblis of the Mist. I don't believe this gives me an attack, but I also don't remember. Oh, I guess I do go for it here. So I just go for the attack all, thinking that the Makeshift Mauler is kind of my biggest barrier to doing this as a 4/5. And my attack does look pretty good here. Like they're probably putting the 1/1 on my 3/1. They probably put like the 3/4 on my 2/2 that doesn't give me value when it dies. No, they actually do that a little differently. But this is all like pretty reasonable too. They're just trying to like trade across the board. And yeah, they get to trade the Loyal Cathar for the Gale Drifter, but other than that, this is just like pretty terrible for them. So just trying to like brute force our way to the end of this game here. Find a Plains off the top, and they tap this down. I don't think we have any attacks into this Makeshift Mauler. Oh, this time we do find a Borrowed Grace, and so yeah, this should just seal the deal here. So they go for the obvious blocks, and this Borrowed Grace should kill them, if not just completely wipe out their board. And fortunately it does kill them when we go to 40 life here. So yeah, that was the league with the mono white deck that we drafted. Really sweet deck. Enormous punish once again for not attacking with the 2/2 in a spot where it felt like that didn't matter at all. And kind of disappointing game against the 4-color kind of rare pile, but that is just kind of how this format goes. I think I did my best to be able to beat that deck. I think I made some good mulliganing decisions, reasonable deck building decisions, and I stayed mono white in a draft where I easily could have ended up Selesnya or Boros. So all in all, I think this is a pretty sweet one with some minor misplays, but hopefully enjoyable despite them. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.